Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Henry Debem. I will be taking you through some principles and concepts of conducting a scoping review research. Okay, so let's move on. So in this session, these are the objectives, the learning outcomes, what I'm expecting that you should be able to learn at the end of this session. So the first is understanding the key concepts of scoping review, and understanding the basis for using a scoping review research. And lastly, to acquire essential skills relevant in conducting a scoping review research. So what is a scoping review study? Well, a scoping review is a type of a literature study. You know, you have other types of literature review studies like narrative review, traditional literature review, systematic review. So they all, you know, a part of literature review studies. But in this case, scoping review is not very different from all of that, but there are still some few differences here. And one thing that just the 3 points you would always want to note whenever you're doing scoping review is to understand that a scoping review has this focus on mapping the available key concepts supporting a rare research area. You know, key concepts supporting a rare research area is not one of those strengths of scoping review is that if you have some areas that are still research areas that are rare, that you think that they haven't gotten some research, or there hasn't been some kind of a very obvious knowledge about that area, and you just want to know exactly what kind of evidences or what kind of information or types of research that have been around within that area. So rather than diving deep into such area with some, more in-depth, robust research, and at some point discover I don't have a lot of information to work with. So scoping review just tries to give you an overview of what's going on there, what kind of evidence we have there, what types of resources we have, what type of research types that have been conducted in that area. So it just before that could inform other further researches that you may want to dive into. So it in the first and this first point is all about mapping, that available key concepts supporting that rare research. Secondly, like I've mentioned, it provides overview of evidence about a research area in the literature. Thirdly, it identifies the major sources and types of evidence available in that area. So this is all just quick points and definition of scoping review that will help you, but I'm going to take you more in depth into other characteristics that you would want to see, and that clearly identifies and differentiates scoping review from other types of literature reviews. So you also want to know that there are several reasons why authors or researchers would want to conduct scoping review or choose scoping review. I've talked about it, while I was talking earlier, but in a very straight key point, you just want to see that some researchers will want to investigate to investigate the scope and nature of research activities conducted so far. I've mentioned that. That's another reason. Another reason could be to determine the need for conducting a systematic review, a more robust literature review, like I've mentioned that as well. And also you might want to identify, summarize, and disseminate major research evidences and findings to stakeholders. This is more like what students would want to get into. It could be that could inform their choices of scoping review, so. But it's also very, very important because, like I mentioned earlier, in most cases, people do not have enough information about what is going on in certain research area. And again, for policymakers who are also, they want to get into some policymaking, decision processes, and they don't have much information about that area. So scoping review could help you, run through literature and bring out some quick evidence that could help to disseminate those information and help the policymakers. Then lastly, to identify possible knowledge gaps in the literature. So yeah, scoping review can help us do that. So common characteristics of scoping study. First, it's a broad search with broad results, but very comprehensive. So there is no specific or highly focused research question, with scoping review. Unlike the systematic review, that will be a bit specific constructs within a line of thought, and it's not that way with scoping review. It's kind of a bit broad. Then it's also relatively short. Something you can do in a in a short time, like systematic review. So that's another good thing and about that. And one of the reasons why this is being recommended to the students, considering the period of time you have for your master's research, this could be a quick take for you. Okay, then it's also considers all literature, um, regardless of study design, you know, um, regardless of study designs. It's also an iterative and flexible process. Iterative in the sense that it's something you can always go over and over and over, and it's very, very flexible. There is no very strict and detailed methodological procedures to conducting scoping review, at the moment. But definitely we'll have some kind of framework that will help us to do that. But so that is it. So it's just no very strict. It's very flexible. You can also have a lot of consultations like you have in next one. Peer consultations could be optional at this time, but it's advised where possible, because when you have more hands and more interests, more opinions in such, help run some of these reviews and come up with some evidences and make sure that it aligns with other, it has some kind of concurrence. It helps to make it more robust. But at the student level, that might not be necessary because of time. So it does not assess quality of evidence. It's another kind of weakness, with the scoping review. It is not like a systematic review where you look at the validating, evaluating research, sources or articles to see their weaknesses and strengths and compare, against the strengths. That's the strength for systematic review. But for scoping review, we don't have that yet. It's not, you don't go into, so you look at all publications you can publish and unpublished, all sources you can get your hands hold on, right? So that is that. Then next one is there's no definitive approach for conducting scoping review yet. I've said that. So I'll use this chart to make it easier for you to understand the strengths. They are all common characteristics, but you could have strengths. They could be classified as strengths or challenges, and there's this common boundary between strengths and challenges that those characteristics could fall in between. It could be a strength, it could also be challenges. So for the strengths here, you have it provides overview of state of evidence in the field. It includes published and unpublished literature. I've said all this is just for you to see the classifications. Then it includes wide range of study designs and methodologies. So tool is also a tool, an instrument for mapping broad and diverse topics. Then it's also a systematic process. It could be replicable, it could be transparent, it could be rigorous. Okay, like I said, it could be comprehensive. So that is fine. Then it synthesizes evidence on an emerging topic that is still new, that's still rare, haven't gotten much interest in it or information on that. So it focuses on state of research activities rather than quality of literature, like I mentioned earlier. Then it also involves some consultation phase. Then for the challenges, so you have it's difficult to establish boundaries with the broad scope. That's the scoping review. It can go as wide as it's not as specific, it's not as defined as you have in the systematic review. So it could be broad. It's just for you to manage how broad you think it can go. Then it lacks detailed methodological steps, guidance, and standards. I've mentioned that. It's unclear how to interpret scoping evidence with lack of quality appraisal, um, like you will find in systematic review. Then the scoping terminologies and definitions also vary. Different authors could come with their different definitions, trying to suit the purpose of using this scoping review. Okay, then it's also the feasibility again. It's looking at the potential requirements for increased time and resources. So it can work. It can work within the time available to you. It can do that. So looking at the iterative processes, looking at the stakeholder consultations, how many people, how many stakeholders you want to get involved, and how many times you could want to go back to that and update what information you have. Then the study may be out of date and at the time of completion. This being that by the time you finish search and you are going through all those processes of reviewing and putting things in order, there could be new researches, being, pumping into the literature space that you might not have covered. So new information could be coming in while you are working what you have already. However, that's not a big problem in the sense that you always want to state period of time you conducted the research, so any reader could know, okay, this is done, it's covered, it's covered between this period of time. So that is fine. Then let's quickly run through the scoping review framework. This kind of the framework that will help you in the processes and the procedures of conducting your scoping review, right? So first one is to identify the research question. Identifying your research question means using the PICO framework. PICO framework is population, intervention, control, or comparator, and outcomes. All right. So it helps you to frame your research questions. Just make sure that your research questions, research question has these elements of PICO. So I give an example here to say, what is the effectiveness of health interventions in reducing obesity among adults in Africa or West Africa or Ghana, right? So now population here, you have the population, adults. The intervention here is the health interventions, right? Obesity related health interventions, while the comparator here could be no intervention. You're looking at interventions and their effectiveness against no intervention. That could be the comparator, control or comparator. Why the outcome here is reduced obesity. That's the outcome you're trying to see. So that's interesting. Now, the second one is identifying relevant studies. Identifying relevant studies. And how do you do this? Yeah, so you look at studies that are relevant in answering your research questions. They have to be connected with your research questions, okay, or your research questions. So a lot of students miss that. You just get into the literature and start pulling anything you see, without seeing how they are connected with the research questions. So you're going to be very careful about that. So, and you're looking at both published and unpublished articles, or then you search different sources. You're going to look at the electronic database. You're going to look at the reference list, your hard copy journals, relevant organizations and conferences and sites, to check what's available that will help respond to your research questions. And at this point, what you do here is that, because you're still searching, so you're not doing in-depth review of the article, you're just looking at what articles that are relevant to your research questions. So you know what are the central points or central elements of your research questions. So you might just be looking at the abstracts, and anyone that has has a relevant theme, that is connected with your research question, you just pop it in. So at this point, you just taken in, you've not started doing the main research of the article. So that's what you do in the next step. You are looking at the theme, you're looking at just to pick, you could look at just population or intervention or whatever, just the one that aligns with the article, with the central research questions, like I said. So you just pop it in. Then you now go to the next stage, which is study selection. So in your study selection, you develop, at this point, you develop inclusion and exclusion criteria. This where you now dive in deeper into reviewing the article. So have your inclusion, you have your exclusion, and for your inclusion criteria, you consider themes and topics that are relevant to your central research questions. And at this point, you're looking at a study population. Your study population already, so you're taking the one that's the articles or the sources that covers that cover your research, the study population. Then you're looking at obesity, for example, using the research questions I gave earlier. So you're looking at obesity related interventions. You're looking at documented outcomes on reduced obesity. So these are could be the key inclusion criteria. So you just put them there. Then the next stage, you also consider your exclusion criteria. And the exclusion criteria, I'm not actually opposite of inclusion. This is another common error that students make, not just in scoping review. In fact, in most of the traditional research, methods, you just say, okay, you're looking at 20, maybe your population, study population, young adults 20 to say 15, or rather 18 to 24 years, for example, just any age. Okay. And when they get to the exclusion criteria, they will not say any adults that is beyond this age. Already you've included. So I don't think there's nothing you could exclude because you've already considered inclusion. So exclusion is not opposite of inclusion. You don't say, uh, I'm taking in 20 years below and exclusion is 20 years above. Because if you've taken in 20 years below, there wouldn't be need for taking out anyone. So that is it. So exclusion here, you're looking at if this, looking at the eligibility, what other criteria could exclude any case that's already eligible for inclusion in the study. So what other criteria, what other characteristics that could exclude them? That's what you consider as exclusion criteria. So in this case, when you've gotten the first set, including your taking in your articles, then the exclusion here, you look at things like years of publication, and it's advisable that you consider a recency of 5 years, from the time you're conducting the research. 5 years, it helps to make your period relevant and still recent. You don't want to do like 20 years back. You're mixing old concepts and new concepts. There are some old concepts that might not be very relevant at the point. So you just make it as short as possible. You could also increase it a bit if you don't find too much articles within 5 years. Yes, you can extend a bit. However, just try to consider make it as recent as possible. Then you could also look at off languages. Maybe you want to consider only English language, so other language that is not English. They don't want to go uh, into the difficult stress of trying to do wrong interpretations and all that. So you just say any language that is not English language, or that is not any language of your choice, or that's not African language, whatever you like. You're taking it off. So those are the exclusions. They're also considering geographical coverage. If you're looking at Africa, so anyone that is not within Africa, that's published outside Africa, you're taking that out. So that's your exclusion criteria. Okay, so for chatting, chatting the data, this is the kind of the extraction, like what you find the traditional data collection or stage in other research. So at this time, because it's a kind of a more of a qualitative, narrative kind of review, so you're not doing any specific data collection from any individual. So you're just picking information from the articles. And how do you pick the information, and what information would you pick? This is what you're chatting, your information extraction tool or information chatting tool will help you. So you have the one I showed here. So it has already shown you what areas that you want to pick information from. Like looking at the first column says author study, design and year of study. You pick it the study setting and location, study population. Yeah, I have sample size here, but that's not necessary because like I said, I don't go into that detail with scoping review. So that's optional. Then aim of the research, then findings and evidence of the research or the article, then methods, limitations. This is also optional. Usually I just like keeping it there for some reasons to, if I find some quick limitations, I just try to pop it there. But for scoping review, that doesn't matter. Then evidence theme. The one I call evidence theme is that you find evidence, you try to develop a kind of a theme, a summarized theme for that evidence. So you can have a lot of more articles having the same theme. It's a kind of a summarized theme to say, okay, you're using it to classify or to sort or to code those articles to say, okay, this agrees with this, and this other article also agrees with um, uh, the same findings, and this other one. So if you have articles that are about the same, have the same concurrence pointing to the same direction, you can give them general theme to put them there. This will help you when you are writing your results, when you are chatting your summaries, for all the information. So it will be very helpful there. So you don't need to get there and start reading one after the other. So as you're doing it, you're already thinking ahead about your results chatting. So that's why it's important that you do that. That will be helpful. Then this is the last stage, which is the collating, summarizing, and reporting the results. This is where, well, what I told you earlier. So here you present an overview of relevant evidences from the literature materials you reviewed, and you chart information from studies using table or chart mapping like you have here. So these are the various headings that you would want to chart. So the first one, you have the summary of key findings and evidences. This is where that's the theme, evidence theme here, the last column, on the right will help you. Okay, so already. So what you're doing here is just summary. You're not pulling all the articles to you to your in your work again. So you're just giving a summary. So here you say, okay, this is a summary of the findings, evidence you have, and the next column it says, okay, so number of supporting sources. So how many articles support this evidence, this general theme that you've been able to. And again, it's good to know that you can have several themes. It's kind of exploration. You don't exactly know what you find, but all you know is that you have a research question you want to respond. So you could have several findings, several evidence that are also responding to your research question. They must not be the same. Like when you're looking at the effectiveness of certain interventions, so you could find different presentations or different opinions of effectiveness um, to reducing obesity, and you could find the different elements again, different directions, so different ways of representing, saying these are evidence that they've provided, and all those that some again that do not have any clear evidence, you also find them as part of your themes, right? So here, next one, so you're looking at number of supporting sources that are classified that are supporting that evidence. So here is proportion of those supporting sources. So for example, you reviewed at the end, you reviewed 30 articles, and out of 30, 7 of them or 10 of them or whatever number is supporting this evidence, right? So you want to know proportion of that 30. So 7 out of 30, 7 over 30, what is the proportion? So this gives us the idea of the weighting the literature to say, and it's good to arrange them in descending order, starting from the highest to the least of proportion, supporting that evidence. So it's good. So it just to weight the literature to say what proportion of the articles in the literature that is, supporting this evidence. And with that, you could have majority of the articles. So what evidence is supported by majority of the articles in the literature. So it gives you a sense of to say, okay, this is actually what the literature says. Majorly, this is what it's saying. Then you also have some other little support here and there. So it's good to just have an idea about them. So under the study designs, you want to pull all study designs that were conducted in the literature supporting that evidence. You could have almost all of them or majority of them having, using cross-sectional studies, for example. So what you do there, you can say, let me say, for example, out of 7, you have 5 using cross-sectional studies. So you can say cross-sectional studies in parentheses 5. So whatever total you have here would be same what you have as number of supporting sources here. Okay, so you could have a cross-sectional, you could have cohort prospective or retrospective study or secondary data analysis or whatever you have, qualitative, you have them, but the number of articles, using that study design, it helps to give us an idea of, like I mentioned earlier, scoping reviews, also looking at types of evidences, types of, sources. So these are the things we want to see there. Then settings, countries of regions here. We also want to know which regions that those articles were conducted, which countries, which regions. It gives us an idea of the spread, geographical spread. So there's also another classifications of sorting by research setting. So if you're doing Africa, you could say, okay, 5 articles from Nigeria, 3 articles from South Africa, another 1, 2, or 3 or 4 from Ghana, all that. So now for a period of years, yes, we want to know, the period of years covered. So how do you know? So it just this would be like you have one provided in published, just publication years. That's all we need here. So by the time you find the publication years, you'll be able to tell the period of years that this information or this evidence you are provided. Then additional comments, you could have some other comments that could be helpful that you want to add to provide some additional clarifications or explanations or comments. Is just have there, just put it there if you have one. So this is all for the results. It's pretty straightforward. Then so for the discussion in scoping review, you just want to look at reviewing the evidence in relation to the research objectives or questions you have, right? Just review it around to see how they've been able to respond to your research questions. And then you also reviewing the findings in comparison and contrast with other key findings and evidence of various study designs, including scoping review. If there's any, you can look at other types of review research, literature review, studies, narrative, traditional, systematic reviews, or even other ones, just to have an idea how if they agree with the common evidence provided in those articles from the literature review. Okay, and last one, you want to look at the limitations of your study with scoping review in context. You've seen a lot of there are a whole lot of weaknesses, challenges that scoping review could pose. So you just see how it relates, how it affects your own study. So you bring out those limitations in the context of your study. That will be fine. And I didn't mention here, but then the conclusion, like I said, you try to run your conclusion as if you're trying to respond to your research question based on the evidence you have. That is that. And lastly, these are the references that supports. Yeah, so these are the references that support my presentation, and is also preferences you might want to look at, especially the first is very common. It's simple, it's clear, forward, but that's basically what. Then also looking at the Peters and Godfrey et al. Peters et al. In 2015, the guidance for conducting systematic scoping review is references you might want to have a look at. But that is fine. So at this point, I thank you for joining this class, and I hope this had made meaning and provide more clarity and sense to your work or to what you do. Then I also didn't mention about ethical review, ethical process here. So the one good advantage, strong advantage, this has to do with school policy, with ethics. So for those that would want to go through Bureau, or that would want to go through Bureau, looking at the processes as well. This scoping review doesn't require Bureau application or Bureau approval. So if you're doing scoping review, then you don't need to do Bureau approval. Your instructor would let you know more about that. So you can make the best use of your time if you're going with a scoping review. So thank you so much and have a wonderful time in school. Best of luck.